You stand before the heavy office door, your chest violently tightens, your palms sweat. You are about to step into a high-pressure negotiation, a brutal presentation, or a toxic confrontation. Society explicitly tells you to just be yourself. They demand absolute authenticity in every professional setting. But following this naive advice feels like walking directly into a radioactive reactor without any protective gear. The suffocating anxiety you feel is not a sign of emotional weakness. It is a severe structural warning. When you bring your raw, vulnerable identity into a deeply hostile environment, you are actively inviting massive psychological radiation to burn through your delicate personality core. In this video, we will completely destroy the destructive myth of constant authenticity. We will explore the elite cognitive architecture of the second mind. You will learn how to construct a separate, impenetrable mental personality designed exclusively to absorb extreme stress without feeling a single drop of fear. Stop sacrificing your true self to a ruthless world. It is time to forge a biological hazmat suit. Modern corporate culture constantly force-feeds you a highly dangerous philosophy. They preach the gospel of vulnerability, demanding that you bring your whole, authentic self to the workplace. Industry leaders and self-help gurus aggressively sell the idea that true success requires total emotional transparency. You try to follow this incredibly foolish rule, bringing your soft, unguarded heart into aggressive boardrooms and brutal client meetings. You share your real fears, you express your genuine frustrations, and you desperately hope that the world will reward your honesty. But what actually happens at the end of the day? You are left feeling completely drained, manipulated, and profoundly empty. The corporate ecosystem does not nurture your authenticity. It brutally weaponizes it against you. This is the great lie of modern professional development. The advice to just be yourself is a recipe for absolute emotional suicide. Your true identity is a highly sensitive, delicately balanced biological core. When you throw this unprotected core into a competitive, high-stakes environment, you are not being brave. You are exposing your most sacred psychological tissue to massive doses of toxic, social radiation. The sharp criticisms, the passive-aggressive emails, and the ruthless demands of your career act as highly corrosive radioactive isotopes. They relentlessly bombard your unprotected mind, causing a rapid, devastating erosion of your personal identity. You are not failing at being authentic, and you are certainly not an overly sensitive professional. You are simply suffering from severe radiation sickness of the soul. The people who tell you to lower your emotional defenses are actively sending you into a biological slaughterhouse. They completely ignore the fundamental, undeniable laws of psychological architecture. Your true self was designed exclusively to be shared within the safe, heavily fortified walls of your home, reserved only for the people who truly love you. It was never meant to be paraded in front of apathetic strangers, hostile managers, or aggressive competitors. This is your ultimate architectural vindication. You must instantly stop feeling guilty for acting fake, cold, or totally disconnected during high-stress situations. Putting on a professional, emotionless mask is not a cowardly act of deception. It is an elite, highly intelligent quarantine protocol. You are building a thick, impenetrable concrete wall to protect the pure, untainted core of who you actually are. You are actively choosing to isolate the toxicity, preventing the radiation of the workday from leaking into your sacred personal life. But understanding the necessity of this protective wall is not enough to survive the actual, heavy impact. To truly master this defensive structure, we must strip away the abstract psychology completely. We must look at the exact mechanics of mental compartmentalization, dissecting how to consciously build a second, disposable personality. We are going straight into the quarantine zone, observing exactly how your brain constructs a bulletproof biological bunker. Leave the motivational quotes at the door. Your fragile ego has absolutely no authority inside this dark, mental quarantine zone. We are zooming directly into the rigid architectural blueprint of your psychological immune system. We will completely ignore your conscious feelings, focusing purely on the mechanics of emotional survival. Let us observe the exact mechanical process of building a separate, disposable identity. Minute 1. You step into a toxic negotiation room. Minute 2. The psychological radiation violently hits your sensory receptors. The hostility is heavy, piercing, and overwhelmingly dense in the air. If your true identity absorbs this direct, unfiltered impact, your delicate emotional core will instantly shatter into 1,000 pieces. But your brain acts as a brilliant, ruthless architect. It aggressively activates a powerful defense mechanism, known clinically within psychiatric fields as constructive dissociation. Minute 3. The massive blast doors of your identity core violently slam shut. Your brain immediately diverts the incoming electrical currents. It routes them entirely away from your vulnerable emotions, forming a brand new, parallel neural pathway. You are physically forging the second mind. This is not a vague psychological metaphor used in therapy. It is a highly specialized, lead-lined mental bunker constructed in real time just to take the heavy hits. The chilling coldness you feel spreading through your chest is not you losing your precious humanity. It is the wet concrete of your new psychological armor, rapidly hardening into an absolute, impenetrable wall. You look directly at the aggressive client. You feel absolutely nothing inside. The harsh, manipulative words simply bounce off your newly forged armor, leaving no scratches on your core. You are not a sociopath, and you are definitely not a fake, heartless machine. You are executing a flawless, biological quarantine protocol. Your nervous system is actively sacrificing a temporary, disposable personality. It sends this artificial soldier out to the front lines, intentionally absorbing all the toxic psychological damage. This brilliant maneuver ensures your authentic self remains perfectly untouched, safely hidden behind the heavy blast doors. This is your ultimate architectural absolution. You cannot survive high-stress corporate environments without this secondary, tactical armor. The profound numbness you constantly experience is not a mental defect. It is the ultimate survival shield. Stop. Look at the sheer brilliance of this internal fortress. Why does society repeatedly label this brilliant defensive architecture as a moral flaw? Why are we explicitly told that wearing a protective psychological armor is a sign of deceit? To dismantle this incredibly dangerous modern lie, we must abruptly zoom out of this mental bunker. We must drag this heavy, lead-lined armor back into the brutal, blood-stained battlefields of our ancient history. We are leaving the corporate office entirely, stepping directly into the ruthless, unforgiving era of the ancient warrior. 3,000 years ago, the brutal, blood-drenched battlefields of the ancient empires. There are no safe spaces, no HR departments, and absolutely no authentic feelings. In the unforgiving era of extreme physical warfare, survival did not depend on your emotional vulnerability. It depended entirely on your ability to mentally compartmentalize. When an ancient king or a seasoned warrior marched into absolute carnage, they never brought the identity of a loving father or a gentle husband to the front lines. If you carried your soft, unprotected soul into the chaos of flying arrows and clashing steel, you would instantly paralyze and die. To prevent this psychological destruction, they actively forged a ruthless, emotionless mental construct. They put on a psychological war mask, creating a terrifying second mind exclusively designed to absorb the horror of combat. This severe dissociation was not a mental illness, but a brilliant, highly revered survival strategy. It allowed them to engage in relentless brutality and then safely remove the mask when they returned home, perfectly preserving their pure humanity. Now, aggressively pull this majestic, battle-tested, psychological architecture into the sterile, fluorescent lighting of the modern corporate world. Look at the absolute absurdity of the 21st century workplace. You are stepping into a fiercely competitive industry, facing aggressive negotiations and toxic corporate politics every single day. But instead of handing you a shield, modern society aggressively demands that you bring your whole, authentic self to the office. You are being ordered to walk onto a ruthless, highly competitive battlefield completely naked, stripped of all your natural psychological armor. It is a terrifying, impossible biological contradiction. Every time you walk into a boardroom or face a manipulative client, corporate culture expects you to be an open, vulnerable human being. But your ancient nervous system is silently screaming in pure, logical terror. Your brain is desperately trying to build a protective quarantine zone, while society relentlessly shames you for not being transparent enough. You are constantly punishing yourself for feeling detached, but you are completely missing the tragedy of this historical mismatch. You are not a fake, heartless professional. You are the tragic, majestic heir to an ancient warrior lineage, currently trapped in a culture that romanticizes emotional suicide. The modern world relentlessly exploits your desire for authenticity, forcing you to constantly expose your most delicate identity core to the relentless crossfire of corporate greed. You are paying a massive, exhausting psychological tax for a civilization that demands constant, unnatural, emotional bleeding. The colleagues who judge your cold, unbothered exterior are completely oblivious to the sacred purpose of this mental fortress. They do not realize that your emotional detachment is the exact same armor that kept empires from collapsing into madness. It is a blind, desperate clash of survival instincts where the unprotected minds burn out and the armored minds survive. The entire fabric of modern professional advice is built upon this massive, unacknowledged psychological lie. We are a species of hardened survivors, pretending that the battlefield is just a friendly community. So, stop apologizing for a defensive wall that is desperately trying to keep your soul intact. Stop feeling ashamed of a second mind that bravely absorbs the poison so your true self can remain pure. Pause. Let the deafening roar of the ancient battlefields fade into total, absolute silence. Stop the relentless, exhausting march of human history. We have successfully traced your professional numbness back to its brutal, majestic origins. We have exposed the grand, destructive illusion of modern workplace vulnerability. But knowing the violent history of your psychological armor does not bring you profound peace in this exact moment. The ancient empires have fallen. The swords and the shields have all turned to dust. Let the heavy dust of the ancient battlefields completely settle into the quiet space around you. The brutal history of armored warriors and the demands of professional survival no longer hold any power in this silent room. I want you to gently release the deep tension you have been carrying in your chest. Feel the exhausted muscles of your shoulders finally soften, surrendering to gravity after a long day of pretending. You have spent years feeling profoundly guilty for acting like a cold machine at work, silently punishing yourself whenever you felt emotionally disconnected. You truly believed that by building a thick wall of numbness, you were slowly losing your beautiful, fragile humanity. But the obsessive pursuit of total authenticity in a deeply toxic environment is a cruel, life-draining illusion. Society demands that you offer your soft, unprotected heart to a corporate machine that only consumes, constantly radiating a polite and utterly exhausting compliance. It asks you to betray your own psychological immune system, treating your most sacred identity as a cheap commodity for public consumption. Your biology simply refuses to be a victim. The coldness you project in a boardroom is not a loss of humanity, and it is certainly not a moral failure on your part. It is the majestic, profound wisdom of a living creature, a being that has endured too much friction to pretend that the workplace is entirely safe. Today, you are officially granted the existential license to permanently compartmentalize your precious soul. You are hereby given the absolute right to construct, maintain, and deploy your second mind without a single ounce of shame. You no longer need to violently force your true self into a hostile room just to prove your honesty. Let the heavy blast doors close, allowing your true nervous system to rest in its natural, protected state deep within the fortress. A mind that occasionally shuts down its empathy, a mind that bravely sends an emotionless soldier to the front lines, is infinitely more beautiful than a shattered, bleeding identity. The emotional detachment and the calculated coldness are the sacred, undeniable proofs of a deeply feeling, highly valuable human being protecting its core. It is the architecture of true self-love. When you finally allow your second mind to absorb the daily radiation, you filter out the shallow damage, preserving your sacred energy only for those who truly love you. You are free to be an armored, fiercely protected survivor. The heavy burden of endless vulnerability has finally dropped to the floor, leaving your true skin completely safe in the quiet truth of this moment. You have reclaimed the sovereign right to simply deploy a shield without feeling like a fraud. But the sun will eventually rise, and the unforgiving architecture of the corporate world will once again demand your participation. The architectural truth has been revealed, but the market does not care about your mental fortress. Tomorrow morning, when you are forced to step into a toxic negotiation or a terrifying client meeting, will you let the world crush your newly liberated identity? Or will you let your second mind take the hit while your soul remains perfectly untouched? You have successfully constructed your mental fortress. The heavy armor protects your fragile core during the day, absorbing the toxic radiation of the corporate world flawlessly. But this brilliant architectural defense is dangerously incomplete. You have completely forgotten the physical toll of confining your true identity in the dark. While your second mind handles the brutal daylight, your suppressed nervous system is secretly preparing a violent rebellion. When the sun sets and you strip off that heavy psychological suit, your brain absolutely refuses to shut down. The repressed energy violently erupts, actively fighting against the biological necessity of sleep. At 3 a.m, your exhausted mind enters a bizarre, hyper-lucid state, trying to reclaim its lost freedom. This brutal sleep deprivation is not a medical disorder, but a specific mental frequency that history's greatest geniuses intentionally triggered. Your daytime survival is finally secured, but your midnight architecture is currently bleeding out. If your soul is exhausted from constantly wearing this heavy professional armor, Leave the word quarantine in the comments below. Do this to acknowledge the silent, heavy toll of your daily survival. The corporate war is paused, but the midnight rebellion is just beginning. You can choose to ignore this nocturnal phenomenon, letting the sleepless nights slowly destroy your biological rhythm. Or you can click the video on your screen right now to decode the 3-morning paradox of genius. The illusion of peaceful rest ends here. The choice is yours.